The science behind microbiome is just mind-blowing. It's incredible to think about all the new things that we're learning. I want everybody to close your eyes and start thinking about maybe some plants, animals, different things that you might find on the earth. So close your eyes and think about as many plants, animals, creatures, anything as you can. I'm guessing most of you were able to think of many different things. We think about the earth, it's totally covered in different plants, totally covered in a huge variety of animals. These plants, these animals, insects, they all kind of work together, and sometimes they do things that are good for the environment. Sometimes people, they do things that are not so great for the environment. And even though we're just little teeny tiny, basically small little living specks on the earth, and on the scale of the universe, we're very, very small, we have a pretty big impact on the health of the earth. That's kind of like the way microbiome works in us. We say good metabolic health starts in the gut, and that's really true. You are what you eat. But the reason you are what you eat isn't really what we think when we say that. The reason you are what you eat is because, unlike the earth, we actually have control over our microbiome. The earth is pretty much stuck with human beings all over the earth that sometimes do good things for the earth, sometimes do bad things for the earth. It doesn't really get a say. We get to control what our microbiome is because we can control what we put into our bodies. Now, I want to give you just a small idea of the scale of the microbiome. Humans have about 20,000, maybe 25,000 human genes in their body. This was a study that was done on a group of European, Chinese, and American people looking at their microbial genes. And in just these three small groups, there was over 10 or almost 10 million microbial genes identified. That is incredible. I want you to think about that for a second. 20,000 human genes, but inside our bodies, 10 million microbial genes. These are genes that are actually doing stuff. They're encoding for proteins. They're excreting small molecules. They're actively working inside of our bodies. And most of the time, they're actually supposed to be working inside of our bodies. This is actually kind of an interesting image, looking at the diversity of different microbes just on our skin, which is not an area where we have a huge amount of microbes as compared to our gut. But we do have microbes living on our skin that are supposed to live there. On one side, there is microbial diversity. And based on the scale, you can see there's a lot of bluish dots. These are areas where it's less diverse. And even in those less diverse areas, if you look on the right side of the screen where it says biochemical, that's the areas where there's different molecules that have been excreted by our microbiome. And even though there's less diversity of microbes on our skin in some areas, there's a huge diversity of small molecules that these microbes have excreted. Now, the small molecules are what the microbes use to communicate to each other. And it's also what our cells use to communicate with each other. All cells, whether bacterial or mammalian cells, use small molecules to talk to each other. And bacteria have evolved with our bodies. They've learned how to communicate with our cells. They excrete small molecules specifically to communicate with our cells. That actually is part of why they impact human life and our health. I want to talk about a study that was done at, I think, UC San Francisco. This was a really cool study. They've actually done several studies with infants. Infants have they have a very basic microbiome of their own when they're born. And lots of different things affect their microbiome growth. And if you look at differences in what an infant is exposed to, whether it's vaginally delivered or cesarean, whether it's breastfed or formula fed, you get significant differences in the microbiome. And this study was just specifically looking at the microbiome of infants. And then 2 years later, phenotypically, whether they were overweight or not. And they basically took all this microbiome information that they had gotten from the infants, and they broke the microbiomes into 3 different groups. And then they looked to see if there were any differences phenotypically 2 years down the road. So basically, if the babies looked different later. And they found that with one of the microbiomes, the babies had a higher tendency towards being obese. That was the microbiome of the babies that were predominantly formula fed. There were some other factors as well, but that was one of the main factors. It changes the microbiome, and it actually led to enhanced rates of childhood obesity. They've done similar studies with asthma and allergies, where different factors in infants' first few weeks to months of life dramatically impact whether they're going to be likely to get asthma or allergies. If a child is not exposed to pets, livestock, they actually have a higher risk of getting asthma or allergies, because you're supposed to be around bacteria. You're supposed to be around dirty things, so to speak. And as you grow up, it changes your microbiome. And your microbiome actually protects you from certain disease states if it's a healthy microbiome. There are a wide variety of diseases that have been associated with microbiome. Some of the more interesting ones are these disease states of the brain, like depression, autism, but asthma is really, really common. Allergies, really, really common. Diseases that are associated with microbiome problems. The good news is, like I was saying before, we're not like the earth. We're not stuck with what we have. Microbiome changes all the time. Changes begin to happen in 3 to 4 days. So this article says that in 3 to 4 days, your microbiome can start to change. There's been additional studies that have been done that say 90 days to 6 months, you can have a complete change in your microbiome, from an unhealthy microbiome to a very healthy microbiome, if you're consistent for 90 days to 6 months. So we can dramatically impact our health through impacting our microbiome.
The human body is made up of an estimated 30 trillion cells, but it's also home to around 39 trillion bacteria. Together with fungi and viruses, they form a vast community called the microbiome. The largest and most diverse population of bacteria are found in the gut, with thousands of different types inside our intestines. These microbes may be tiny, but they play a huge role in our health. They help train the immune system, so it knows what to eliminate or ignore. They also help us digest food. But scientists now think gut bacteria play a role in how some cancers start, and maybe even how these cancers respond to treatment. Inflammation happens when the cells in our bodies become damaged or infected, and molecules released during long periods of gut inflammation can push normal cells towards becoming cancerous. Certain types of gut bacteria may be behind the bouts of inflammation responsible for starting some bowel cancers. And research has shown that the microbiome in bowel cancer patients can look different to the microbiome in people who are healthy. The latest immune-boosting cancer treatments have shown great promise, but they don't work for everyone. And scientists think the microbiome's link to the immune system could, in some cases, explain why. Research has shown that certain good bacteria are more common in the guts of some cancer patients who responded to immunotherapy. Scientists now want to see if changing a patient's microbiome might boost the effects of treatment. But exactly how these vibrant communities might influence cancer and the immune system remains a mystery. Right now, Cancer Research UK-funded scientists are among those trying to find out more. And if they do, tinkering with the microbiome could become a new way to prevent and treat cancer.